Imagine waking up on a January morning and glancing at the thermometer outside your window. The mercury has dropped to minus 55 degrees Celsius. The air is so cold that if you throw a cup of boiling water into the sky, it freezes before a single drop hits the ground. Your eyelashes frost over in seconds. The metal of your car door handle could rip the skin clean off your bare fingers if you touched it without a glove. This is not a science experiment, and this is not a polar research base. This is an ordinary Tuesday morning in Yakutsk, Russia, the coldest permanently inhabited city on the face of the earth. Yakutsk sits in the Sakha Republic of northeastern Siberia, a region so enormous and remote it is difficult to comprehend from warmer latitudes. The city is home to roughly 400,000 people, a number that shocks most outsiders. Most people assume only a handful of researchers or indigenous nomads could endure such conditions. Yet Yakutsk is a functioning modern city with universities, shopping malls, theaters, and a thriving cultural scene. People are born there, grow old there, raise families there, and many would not dream of living anywhere else. The question that naturally follows is simple but endlessly fascinating. Why? To understand why nearly 500,000 people call the world's coldest city home, you have to travel back in time, dig into the geology beneath the frozen ground, explore the traditions of the Yakut people, and examine the machinery of the Soviet Empire. The story of Yakutsk is not simply a story about cold. It is a story about diamonds, mammoths, indigenous identity, Stalinist ambition, and the remarkable stubbornness of the human spirit. Yakutsk lies at approximately 62 degrees north latitude, just below the Arctic Circle. It sits on the western bank of the Lena River in a broad valley surrounded by taiga forest. The city is roughly 4,900 kilometers east of Moscow so far that Yakutsk is actually closer to Alaska than to the Russian capital. The extreme cold of Yakutsk is not purely a function of latitude. Many cities at similar latitudes, places like Tromsø or Reykjavik, enjoy mild winters because of oceanic influence. Yakutsk has no such relief. It lies deep in the Asian interior, thousands of kilometers from any large body of water. In winter, Siberian high-pressure systems sit motionless over the region for weeks, trapping cold, dense air in the valleys. There is no warm Atlantic current, no maritime airflow, no oceanic buffer. The cold simply accumulates. The average January temperature in Yakutsk hovers around minus 43 degrees Celsius. The record low, recorded in the nearby village of Oymyakon in 1924, sits at minus 71.2 degrees Celsius, a number so extreme that most people's minds cannot fully absorb it. For context, that temperature is colder than dry ice, colder than the surface of Mars on a typical night, and cold enough to freeze carbon dioxide out of the air. Yet even Yakutsk itself has seen temperatures below minus 60 degrees, and temperatures below minus 50 are considered unremarkable by local standards. What makes the climate particularly surreal is the summer. Yakutsk can reach plus 38 degrees Celsius in July. The annual temperature swing of more than 80 degrees Celsius is one of the largest of any inhabited city on the planet. In summer, Yakutsk is warmer than Paris. Long before the Russian Cossacks arrived, the land around the Lena River Valley was home to the Sakha people, also known as the Yakuts. The Sakha are a Turkic-speaking people believed to have migrated north from regions near Lake Baikal roughly 1,000 years ago. Over centuries, they adapted with extraordinary sophistication to one of the harshest environments on Earth, developing horse breeds that survive Siberian winters by pawing through snow to find grass, raising cattle in underground winter barns, and creating clothing from reindeer hide and wolverine fur that remains more effective at retaining body heat than almost anything modern textile science has produced. The Sakha worldview was inseparable from the frozen landscape. Their shamanic traditions treated the cold itself as a kind of living force to be negotiated with, rather than merely a climatic condition. Their language developed dozens of words for different qualities and intensities of cold, not poetic excess, but practical necessity. Knowing the difference between cold that would kill livestock and cold that merely froze rivers was survival knowledge of the most direct kind. When Russian Cossack explorers reached the Lena River in the early 17th century, they found the Sakha already established as the dominant group. The founding of Yakutsk followed in 1632, when Russian settlers established a winter fort on the riverbank. Primarily interested in the fur trade, sable, fox, and ermine were enormously valuable in European markets. For the Sakha, the Russian arrival brought disease and taxation in the form of fur tribute, but also trade goods, and a slow integration into a larger imperial economy. Unlike many indigenous groups elsewhere, the Sakha culture proved remarkably resilient. Today, they make up roughly half the population of the Sakha Republic, with their language, cuisine, and cultural practices vigorously alive. The Soviet project and forced settlement, the massive growth of Yakutsk as a city is inseparable from Soviet history. When the Stalinist industrialization drive began in earnest in the 1930s, Siberia was reimagined not as a frozen wasteland, but as a vast treasury waiting to be extracted. coal, gold, and tin were already known. Geologists suspected there was much more. The Soviet state needed labor, vast quantities of it, and had a ready supply in the form of political prisoners, dissidents, and ethnic minorities. The Gulag system, the network of labor camps that defined one of the most brutal chapters in modern history, placed camps throughout Siberia and the Soviet Far East. Yakutsk became a hub in this network. Hundreds of thousands of prisoners were transported east, many never to return, to dig mines, build roads, and construct buildings in conditions that killed enormous numbers of them. The population of Yakutsk grew dramatically during this period, not because people chose to come, but because the state forced them there. After Stalin's death in 1953 and the gradual dismantling of the Gulag system, many survivors were released but had no means to return home. They remained, and their descendants are among the people of Yakutsk today. The Soviet state also recruited voluntary workers for Siberia through financial incentives. Wages in the Far East were substantially higher than elsewhere in the USSR, a policy known as the Northern Coefficients, and workers who took postings in Yakutsk could accumulate retirement savings far faster than they could in Moscow or Leningrad. For skilled workers, engineers, geologists, doctors, teachers, a stint in Yakutsk represented a significant economic opportunity. Entire institutional networks were built: a university, a medical institute, research centers, a theater, a ballet school. The city was not merely a labor camp, but an ambitious attempt to build a complete Soviet society at the edge of the habitable world. If any single discovery transformed the scale and permanence of human settlement in the region, it was the discovery of diamonds. In 1954, Soviet geologists found kimberlite pipes, the volcanic formations that carry diamonds to the surface, in the Mirny area of the Sakha Republic. Subsequent surveys revealed one of the largest diamond deposits ever found anywhere on Earth. The Soviet Union, desperate for hard currency, immediately recognized the significance. The development of the Mirny diamond mine and subsequent operations throughout the Republic became a state priority. Today, the Sakha Republic produces an estimated 20 to 25% of the world's rough diamond supply by volume. The company Alrosa, majority owned by the Russian and Sakha Republic governments, is one of the largest diamond producers on Earth. The diamond industry has provided an economic rationale for maintaining a substantial, permanent city in Yakutsk. Thousands of jobs in the region are directly or indirectly related to diamonds. Geologists, engineers, equipment operators, logistics specialists, lawyers, doctors, and the teachers who educate their children. But diamonds are not the only resource. The Sakha Republic also has enormous deposits of coal, gold, natural gas, oil, tin, and rare earth minerals. The region sits atop an almost incomprehensible underground wealth that makes the severe climate a price worth paying in the calculations of both corporate and government planners. As long as those resources remain economically viable to extract, Yakutsk will remain a necessary logistical and administrative center, and the city's population will be sustained by the economic gravity of what lies beneath the ground. Building a city in Yakutsk is not merely a matter of walls and roofs thick enough to keep the cold out. The ground itself presents an engineering challenge, unlike almost anything in warmer climates. Beneath Yakutsk lies permafrost, extending to a depth of approximately 1,500 meters, the deepest associated with any major inhabited city. This frozen ground dates back in places to the last ice age and contains preserved remains of woolly mammoths, bison, and other Pleistocene megafauna in extraordinary condition. Yakutsk has a world-class mammoth museum displaying specimens pulled from the permafrost almost intact. The engineering challenge permafrost presents to builders is counterintuitive. You might assume that the problem is making the ground warmer, but the danger is the opposite. Permafrost is stable as long as it stays frozen. If a building is placed directly on permafrost and heat begins to warm the ground beneath it, the permafrost can thaw, turning from solid ice into unstable mud. A building that was perfectly sound can tilt, sink, crack, and collapse. Early buildings in Yakutsk suffered catastrophically from this effect. The solution that Yakutsk engineers developed is elegant and visually striking. Almost every major building, apartment blocks, offices, schools, hospitals, is raised off the ground on concrete stilts called svai, typically 1 to 2 meters above the surface. Cold air circulates freely through this gap, ensuring the warmth of the building never reaches the permafrost below. Walking through the streets of Yakutsk, a visitor sees building after building elevated on stilts, with the spaces beneath them open to the wind. Infrastructure presents similar challenges: underground pipes carrying water, sewage, or heating fluids cannot be buried in the usual way because the heat they carry would thaw the permafrost. Instead, the pipes in Yakutsk run above ground, heavily insulated in large boxy conduits that snake along the streets at head height. This gives Yakutsk an industrial visual character unlike most other cities: elevated buildings, overhead pipe networks, and streets designed primarily for function. Residents regard all of this as entirely normal. For outsiders, the most pressing question about life in Yakutsk is simply practical. How do people manage? The answer involves adaptation, infrastructure, technology, and cultural attitude that together make extreme cold not merely survivable, but livable. Clothing in winter Yakutsk is a serious science. Residents layer carefully, wearing thermal base layers, insulating middle layers, and an outer shell of heavy fur or modern technical fabrics. Traditional Saka fur clothing, parkas, boots called ederbe, and mittens made from reindeer and horsehide remain popular because they outperform even the best modern outdoor gear at extreme temperatures. Many residents own and wear traditional Saka clothing, not as a cultural statement, but simply because it is the most effective technology available. Cars require their own cold weather protocols. Engine oil thickens and becomes nearly useless at extreme temperatures, and diesel fuel can gel completely. Most car owners in Yakutsk plug their vehicles into electric engine block heaters overnight, keeping the engine warm enough to start in the morning. Many parking lots and garages have electrical outlets at every space for this purpose. In the coldest periods, some residents simply leave their cars running continuously rather than risk being unable to restart them. Battery failure is a constant concern. Standard automotive batteries lose most of their capacity at minus 40 degrees, and a dead battery can mean a life-threatening situation if you are stranded far from help. Schools in Yakutsk have cold weather closure thresholds remarkable by any standard. They typically close when temperatures drop below minus 52 degrees Celsius for younger children and minus 58 degrees for older students. In a city where minus 45 is a normal January day, these benchmarks give a sense of how completely the cold has been normalized into the rhythms of daily life. Food preservation takes a different character in Yakutsk. Many residents use outdoor storage or underground cellars, leveraging the permafrost itself as a natural freezer to keep food at stable temperatures year-round. Frozen fish, meat, and berries are dietary staples, and traditional frozen dishes, such as stroganina, thinly shaved frozen raw fish eaten directly from the block, are cultural classics that the extreme cold has made inseparable from local identity. One of the most striking things about Yakutsk to outside visitors is not the cold itself, but the richness of cultural life. Yakutsk has a thriving art scene rooted in Saka traditions thousands of years old. The Olenko, the Saka heroic epic, is one of the great oral literature traditions of Central Asia. Performances can run for hours and draw large audiences. In 2005, UNESCO recognized the Olenko as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, bringing international attention to a tradition that had persisted through Russian colonization, Soviet suppression, and the upheavals of the post-Soviet era. The Yakutsk Festival, held every summer as the days grow long and warm, is one of the most spectacular cultural events in northeastern Russia. It celebrates the Saka New Year, marking the end of the long, dark winter, with horse racing, traditional sports, music, dance, and the communal drinking of kumis, a fermented mare's milk of deep ritual significance. Tens of thousands of people attend, camping in the fields outside the city for days. For the people of Yakutsk, Yakutsk is not a tourist attraction or a heritage preservation exercise. It is a living celebration of identity that matters enormously across all age groups. Yakutsk also has a surprisingly dynamic film industry. The Saka cinema movement that began in the 1990s has produced a body of work attracting international festival attention. Films made in the Saka language, set against the taiga and frozen landscapes, have screened at festivals in Europe and North America and won awards. For a city of 400,000 in one of the most remote regions of the world, this is a remarkable cultural achievement. The filmmakers of Yakutsk are not imitating the rest of the world, but creating something that could only have come from this specific place. The world is warming, and nowhere is this more dramatically visible than in the Arctic and subarctic regions, where places like Yakutsk are located. The temperature rise in Siberia over recent decades has been roughly 2 to 3 times the global average. While this might sound like it would make life in Yakutsk easier, the reality is more complicated and, in many respects, more dangerous. Permafrost thaw is the central concern. As temperatures rise, the frozen ground that has supported Yakutsk's infrastructure for decades is beginning to destabilize. Buildings on stilts calculated for previous temperature conditions are finding their bases warming. Ground solid for thousands of years is becoming unstable. Studies have documented significant increases in building distress across permafrost cities, with foundations shifting and walls cracking. The infrastructure cost of adapting is enormous. There's also the question of what permafrost thaw releases. The permafrost of Siberia contains enormous quantities of organic material that has been frozen and preserved for thousands of years. As it thaws, this material decomposes, releasing carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. This creates a feedback loop. Warming causes thaw. Thaw releases greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases cause further warming. Some climate scientists estimate that Siberian permafrost contains enough carbon to significantly accelerate global warming if even a fraction of it is released over the coming century. The people of Yakutsk, who have done almost nothing to cause climate change, are on the front line of one of the most significant environmental challenges of the modern era. For the residents of Yakutsk themselves, the signs of change are visible and personal. Elders speak of seasonal shifts unthinkable a generation ago. Wild animals are appearing in places they were never seen before. Summer fires, always part of the Siberian landscape, have grown far more severe, with smoke from burning taiga filling the Yakutsk sky for weeks at a time. The city that spent most of its history defined by cold is now contending with a new and uncomfortable heat. Why people stay. All of this context, resources, Soviet history, engineering, culture, explains why Yakutsk exists, but it does not fully explain why individual people choose to stay. When asked, residents give answers that are remarkably consistent across ethnic, professional, and generational lines. Many point first to family and community. Yakutsk is a place where people know their neighbors, where extended families live across generations, where the difficulty of the environment creates a particular solidarity. When the temperature drops to minus 55, your neighbor is not someone you nod at in a hallway. They are someone who might need to save your life, and someone you might need to save. This enforced interdependence creates bonds that many residents describe as the city's greatest asset. People who have left Yakutsk frequently describe a sense of isolation in warmer cities that they never felt growing up in the frozen city they left behind. For the Sakha people specifically, there is also a deep question of identity. The land is not just a place to live, it is a place that made them. The Lena River, the taiga forest, the winters that kill the unprepared and harden the prepared, the mammoths whose bones still emerge from the melting ground. These are part of what it means to be Sakha in a way no warmer city can replicate. To leave is not merely to change your address, but to step away from the foundation of who you are. The resilience of Sakha culture is partly because the people have remained on their land, adapting and persisting rather than dispersing. There's also, frankly, a pride that comes from surviving what most people cannot. Residents of Yakutsk are aware that they live somewhere extraordinary, somewhere that tests and reveals character in ways that more comfortable places do not. A child who grows up navigating the city at minus 50 degrees is learning physical and psychological resilience that no school curriculum can teach. Many former residents who have moved away speak of the cold with genuine nostalgia, not because they miss being uncomfortable, but because they miss the clarity and intensity that the extreme environment lent to every day. Yakutsk is a city that should not exist by any rational cost-benefit analysis. The costs of building and maintaining it are staggering. The engineering challenges are constant. The logistics of supplying a city whose only road access is a seasonal ice road over a frozen river are mind-bending. The climate extracts a toll on the body, on machinery, on buildings, and on the spirit that no fur clothing can fully offset. And yet, there it stands, a city of 400,000 with universities, museums, film festivals, diamond mines, an oral epic recognized by UNESCO, a ballet school, and streets lined with buildings on stilts above frozen ground. A city where babies are born every day into minus 40-degree weather, and where those babies grow up and, more often than not, stay. A city where ancient Sakha knowledge, the machinery of the Soviet state, global diamond economics, and permafrost engineering have combined to create something with no real equivalent anywhere on Earth. The question of why 400,000 people live in the world's coldest city has no single answer. It has many answers layered on top of each other: resources and empire and indigenous resilience and engineering ingenuity, and family and identity and economic necessity and the particular human quality, so strange and so admirable, of looking at a hostile environment and deciding to make it home. Yakutsk exists because human beings, given enough reason and time, can adapt to almost anything. It persists because once you have made such a place your own, leaving is harder than staying. And it will endure because the people who live there have decided, generation after generation, that the cold is not a reason to go. It is a reason to stay.